420 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabis Show. My name's producer Vince, and here's your host, Ricardo Baca.
Vince, dude, that always makes me laugh. Thank you for that. And to everybody else joining us today, welcome to the Cannabist Show, where we talk about all things weed.
Hashtag all things weed.
Hashtag all things weed. Check it out. It's fun. And that is the serious marijuana news and the fun stuff as well. In fact, if you pop over to the Cannabist right now, you can read stories about some early franchising efforts in the weed industry.
You gotta, grow those businesses.
About legalization in Arizona and how that could upend years of drug smuggling in the border state.
You don't have to smuggle a drug if it's legal.
And about the 102 federal inmates whose prison sentences were just commuted by President Barack Obama.
102 additional, right?
Yes, there are many indeed. Producer Vince, I haven't seen you in a while. How you doing?
I'm well. Yeah, it's been pretty much since the last show taping that I got to see you. I'm well. I got an email that said my ballot was printed this morning, which is one of my favorite things in the world, that I'm actually excited about tracking my ballot the way other stoners track their Domino's pizzas. Like, okay, it's being made, it's being delivered. I'm going to have it any minute, and I'm really pumped for that, dude. How you been, Ricardo?
I am good, man. This is a travel month for me, unintentionally so. But I just got back from California yesterday. Made my first trip up through the Emerald Triangle. So
can't wait to hear all about that.
Jazzed. I got photos. I wish I had you with me, Vince. We could have gotten some killer video. Talked to a lot of folks about California cannabis, about Proposition 64. We've been talking about Prop 64 here since it was first introduced. Very conflicted scene up there, extremely conflicted, and also an information and agreement. People are not agreeing with each other, but people are also agreeing with information that's flat out false on both sides of the spectrum. I think they have a long way to go, but I think they're also about to be caught by surprise by what's about to be thrust into their world. Given that all the polls are pointing toward legalization in California. But Vince, it's time for the Week in Weed. Let's just jump right into the Week in Weed, hey?
I don't feel like I have. Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it. Nothing else to say. Week in Weed starts now.
We are starting this Week in Weed right here at the Cannabist, where we have opened up nominations for the world's best marijuana businesses, pot products, and cannabis-focused professionals to be celebrated at this year's Cannabist Awards in Las Vegas next month.
Las Vegas. It's the Cannabist Awards time. Last year, we honored the best Colorado businesses in the marijuana space. But this year, we're going wide, and you can nominate these people and businesses and products from all over the world, please, in more than 40 categories right now at thecannabist.co/awards.
So who is your favorite cannabis educator or researcher? Who makes your favorite vaporizer, your favorite app? Or even the best lighting equipment and nutrients, whether they work here in Colorado or California, Canada, Spain, Holland, China, Uruguay, Germany, Texas, or even Morocco, you can nominate the best of the best in weed at thecannabist.co/awards.
I feel like that should have been Morocco and who knows, even Texas, but who throws the best marijuana events? Who are the industry's most sustainable companies? Who are the best companies working hand in hand with the industry? The ones handling security, legal help, taxes, and much, much, much more. Make your nominations at thecannabist.co/awards.
We'll even announce the 2016 Cannabist Person of the Year at our Cannabist Awards Bash, which will take place during the Marijuana Business Conference in Las Vegas in mid-November. Super excited.
Yeah, man. Again, we're just continuing all that travel we're doing this month into next. If you want to nominate someone for the Person of the Year or for their awesome corporate culture or innovative medical advancements, please, please, please go to, say it with me, thecannabist.co/awards.
Now, elsewhere in the Week in Weed, the public support for marijuana legalization just set a new record high.
No puns?
And no, definitely no puns, please. Vince, guess which age group supports legal weed the most? Millennials, Gen X, or the baby boomers?
You know, I feel like I want to guess that it's the baby boomers, dude. I grew up with a lot of older influences being the ones, encouraging me to try it out for the first time. That's like, it's a different vibe. It's not like a Saturday night, let's just do this one thing once. It's a regular part of life for most of my parents' friends, at least. So, baby boomers?
Baby boomers, let's see. First, here is the story. A record 57% of Americans favor cannabis legalization. That's according to a new Pew Research survey. And that's also up 4 points from 18 months ago. So this is on the increase.
All right, but who supports legal weed the most? I gotta know.
You were actually wrong, Vince, because millennials take the cake here pretty decidedly, as 71% of millennials believe pot should be recreationally legal.
I just didn't want to give the millennials any more attention, dude. I wanted to
You
avoid
are
that.
a millennial. What are you talking about?
Self-loathing millennial.
This is where Gen X and the boomers also support legal pot, but they're more in the 56 to 57% range.
All right, I was wrong. I'll take that. But for those wondering about the silent generation, there's a silent generation. Whoever that is, they are the age group that most opposed this issue, with only 33% of them supporting legal pot quietly, at least. What's a silent generation?
They are your elders, and show some respect, Vince. Jeez. Moving along, up next in the Week in Weed, we have some very big news and a very, very big thank you to give out.
So let's start with the news before the thank you, right?
Okay, here it is. This is a weird humble brag, and we don't really talk about ourselves all too often on this program, so it's weird to have 2 cannabis news notes, let alone 1 in the Week in Weed, but this is how big this is. In August of 2016, the Cannabist actually surpassed high times in monthly unique visitors for the first time in our short 3-year history. The Cannabist drew 885,000 unique visitors in August, and at the same time, High Times drew about 558,000 uniques. That's according to digital analytics firm ComScore.
And that is huge news, Ricardo. Congratulations, first off. But what about the big thank you?
Well, first of all, I want to shout out to all our staffers, the pot critics, producers, including Vince, the full-timers, the freelancers, our crew selling advertisements and sponsorships too. Thank you, friends. You are a part of this. But most of all, I want to thank personally our readers, our viewers, our listeners, for finding us and for trusting us, because your support means everything here. So thank you too. Really, it's that simple. Thank you. And do me a favor. If you like what you hear on the show, what you read on this site, tell a friend about the work that we're doing here.
And don't forget, we remind you at the end of every episode, review us on iTunes, review us on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. It really does make a difference, and it matters. We're here, we're bringing professional journalism to the marijuana space. We are very passionate about getting this right, and we appreciate you all so wicked much.
So lastly, in the Week in Weed, here is Cannabist policy and business writer Alicia Wallace with this week's Quick Hit.
25 seconds. That's how often a drug possession arrest occurred in the United States last year. Despite more favorable laws and opinions toward marijuana, pot arrests outpaced arrests for violent crimes. That's according to the Human Rights Watch and the American Civil Liberties Union. The 2 human rights groups this week released a massive report examining how drug use is treated as a criminal offense in America and the potential ripple effects on society. Most significantly, the groups are calling for the decriminalization of the personal use and possession of small amounts of drugs. The report and the recommendation to decriminalize come at an interesting time for U.S. drug policy. More states are legalizing medical and recreational cannabis, and the nation's drug czar, who himself is in substance abuse recovery, continues to talk about how America can't use arrests and incarcerations to solve addiction issues. For The Cannabist, I'm Alicia Wallace with this week's Quick Hit.
Thanks, Alicia. And now it's time to bring out our first guest. He is a leading educator in the cannabis space, and today he's making his first appearance on the couch. It is my pleasure to welcome Trichome Institute President Max Montrose to the Cannabist Show. Max, bring it up and your bag of tricks, man. How you doing?
Good. Thanks so much, Ricardo.
Good.
Can I put this here?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Thanks.
I somehow knew you would bring props, Max.
Yeah.
And of course, you brought weed, books. We're going to get into all this fun stuff, but first, you know how we start every interview on the show, and that is determining where our guests are on the spectrum. So, Max Montrose, Trichome Institute, Indica or Sativa?
Unfortunately, most people don't know what indica and sativa truly mean. So I'm not sure. So the thing is a lot of people really know this thing called sativa, but we have a lot of genomic evidence that supports the idea that the DNA and the chemotype, the chemistry of sativa is strictly hemp. And that the thing that has a long internodal spacing with more fluffy buds with a tighter leaf structure that's much taller that makes you high and not stoned, what everyone believes could be sativa is technically a NLD, a narrow leaf drug type, which is pretty much an indica and not even a sativa. So I think the thing is I think our whole industry, the public, governments, I think everybody's confused about cannabis, which is why I'm really excited to be a cannabis researcher and a cannabis educator.
Sure.
So we can actually find out which one is it, indica or sativa.
So would you agree, though, that the one type of cannabis acts as a stimulant and another one puts you in the couch?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, you know, it's not indica or sativa dependent because everything is so vastly hybridized. It's terpene dependent. It's the terpenes that will dictate the psychoactivity that we'll experience from cannabis, not really the cannabinoids. They help support the psychoactivity differences. But when it comes to sativa, I love smoking variety types that help me pay attention, focus, and don't wear me down, except for when I'm done with work. Dude, I love smoking indica. You know, like it's good. Yeah, real good.
Interesting. Okay, I should have known. This is our 82nd episode. First time having you on here, and you debunk one of our primary questions we ask everybody. But
sorry, dude.
I look forward to your future writings and research on, you know, I'm aware that there is no true indica, true sativa. At least we've talked about that on the show before, that everything's a dominant or hybrid.
Right. I mean, in our industry it is. In terms of land-race genetics, there are true indicas, but the indicas that we think are sativas with the tight leaves are species indica, subspecies indica, and the ones that we believe are indicas, the fat-leafed ones that make you stoned, are indica species, subspecies of Ganica. And then there's actually a species of hemp in the indica family, which is Indica chinensis.
Oh man, I love having weed nerds on this show. Max, you have to come back more regularly. This is
Anytime,
always
brother.
so fun. And if any of our viewers or listeners have any idea what he's talking about, call me, or actually better yet, tweet at me. Because I want to know you, and maybe you need to be a guest on the show at some point as well. Max, one of your achievements, you've had many in the last decade, but the thing I like the most, and the thing you and I have connected on before, wine industry has sommeliers, coffee has cuppers, people who can tell the difference between types of coffee, where it was grown, how it was roasted. Cheese has mongers. You've created a process for dissecting and grading cannabis, and you call it interpening. So tell us more about interpening, this process that you've helped create.
So what we're doing is we're interpreting terpenes. Interpening does grade cannabis quality. It's a part of the sommelier process of dissecting cannabis. But what interpening also does, and maybe more importantly, is interpreting the terpenes. Like I said, and this is because the terpenes produce smells, and these smells are very detectable, and these detectable smells have a pharmacology. And so interpening is beyond necessary because we are suffering from the strain name dilemma.
Sure.
In Colorado, we have 250 types of Blue Dream because 249 of them aren't Blue Dream. This is a black market industry that has exploded with zero regulation on these variety types that people just come up with names for, which I'm guilty of myself. Back in 2009, before cannabis was regulated, and I was buying pounds off the street to retail at the dispensary, half the time the pounds didn't have a name. So we would just call it AK-47 or Blue Dream. And then you get a seed, and then you think you really have Blue Dream, and it's further front, you know?
Sure.
So instead of saying, shop for this strain name, because you'll never get what you think you're shopping for, or there's a high chance that you won't currently. We teach people the tools to see and smell how cannabis will affect you psychotropically, and also if it's acceptable enough to ingest in the first place.
And so by looking at it, by smelling it, by examining it, you can tell something's true strain.
Sure. So as you can see here, we have like very different bud structures, super dense and tight, kind of long and fluffy in terms of how the plant is built. And so we have these, this is one of our interpreting tools out of many that we have, but it's a tool where if you place a bud on this card, you measure where in your nose you smell the smell. The bud structure and the pistil structure, which will gauge the variety type effect. We also teach people how to test for the acceptable qualities and the highest qualities, the unacceptable visual characteristics of and the smells, and then what you're smelling and what those smells mean when you smoke them. Those smells have a pharmacy. So when you smell this smell, expect this effect. Forget the strain name. The strain name is the thing that is the most least important piece of information in your shopping experience, which is really backwards right now. Everybody shops for this one strain that they've heard of, Girl Scout cookies.
Sure.
And then the other thing people shop for is THC, high THC percentages.
Potency, yeah.
Our community, our smokers, our adult use consumers, and our patients need to know THC doesn't really mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean it's completely bioavailable. So there's so much to learn about cannabis. We had to start an entire institution.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell me this, because when I think of THC, we think of it as the primary psychoactive cannabinoid in weed.
Totally.
Is that accurate?
It is accurate. Well, yes and no. So what I explain is, you're driving a car, and THC is the amount of fuel you have. Do you have rocket fuel and how much of it? The terpenes is what steers the wheel. So which direction do you want to go? And that's kind of why vape pens haven't been as good as flower recently, because the extraction process obliterates those terpenes, and so what you have and what you're smoking is THC.
Sure.
So when you just smoke THC, your car is going to move forward. But if you smoke THC with quite a bit of D-limonene supported by myrcene, then your THC becomes much more bioavailable. Your brain can absorb more of that THC through the blood-brain barrier thanks to the myrcene lubricating it. And then your D-limonene, those citrus-type smells, are going to turn your wheel way up that way.
Sure.
And so I don't smoke to smoke. I smoke for things I need to smoke for. If I need to focus, I can interpret which variety type of cannabis in front of me will give me the type of effect that I'm looking for. And that is what the Cannabis Sommelier program is. It's not just saying we grade weed and we think this is good and this is bad. We do it at a microscopic level.
Sure.
And we teach people how to smell certain species of fungus, Botrytis cinerea. We teach people that the smell of old cannabis is the same smell no matter what the variety type is. So when you come to our interpreting class, and people fly in from all over the world for it, we teach you how to see and smell cannabis variety types and how to dissect it with 50, 60, 70 different samples of cannabis.
Tell me this, though, because if you're saying that it's the terpenes that give a marijuana its angle, its edge, is it going to make you active? Is it going to throw you in the couch? Does that mean that if limonene is present, that limonene could only be present in either an upper or downer, but not both?
That's a really good question. So the thing is cannabis has been hybridized like wildfire. And one of the, fun things to do is to say, my monster indica with my most sexy sativa, what would happen if I put those two together?
Sure, yeah, it's like a Red Bull vodka.
Come on,
what
right?
When I mix
So
this?
people do that, and it's great. What it does is it takes away the purity of what the plant organically designed itself to be. And these are all things to protect itself. Trichomes are designed to protect the cannabis plant. And so are terpenes. A lot of terpenes, like apinene, are insecticidal. Myrcene is anti-herbivore. It's a bitter. So we could go on and on about this.
Sure.
But the thing is, if you have a high percentage of linalool with a high percentage of limonene, H-limonene, then yeah, maybe you're going to have a combination of something that's both a sedative and something that kind of accelerates you, and maybe that chemistry makes it a hybrid-like feeling, and you're really not up or down. Maybe you're both at the same time, or a little, the hybrid feeling is just somewhere in the middle. And what interpening allows us to do is say, okay, these variety types that are massively hybridized, where on the spectrum of hybridization does it fall? And that's why, it's not an indica or a sativa. It's where on the spectrum is it?
There's no true indica, no true sativa. Fascinating.
Definitely not in our industry.
Not right now.
No.
Maybe in the Rift
Well,
Mountains in northern
there's no
Morocco.
landrace genetics. Everything's hybridized.
Tell me this. Interpening, I agree that we need something like this, especially as more states come online and this becomes its own legitimate multi-billion-dollar industry. But why do you think we need interpening? Why do we need sommeliers for cannabis specifically?
Easy answer. We have required lab testing in Colorado, but none of our lab testing tests for quality. So you're testing for potency and you're testing for all the types of microbials that don't matter. We don't test for any of the microbials that do matter that we see on cannabis. And at the end of the day, your potency, means a lot to do with the terpenes, which we don't test for, only the THC. And so there's a lot of horrible product out there. I went shopping for some for my class last night, and I went to this dispensary and I gave this bud tender a private interpening because all of their wholesale product that they bought, this one was 6 months old. This one is unflushed. This one is hermaphroditic. This one, has this. And what are you, a cannabis patient? Do you have PTSD? I hate to break it to you, but so many of these variety types, sometimes it's the terpenes in there that is responsible for giving people paranoia. And so I would hate to advise a patient on a strain they should smoke based off of its name when I know that the next state over, it will be a different plant due to cannabis morphology, and that we have a strain name dilemma. So if you want to either help a patient or an adult use consumer, make sure that they're going to have the type of experience that they're looking for, and also make sure that the cannabis that they're going to consume is appropriate and acceptable. There's a skill set for that, and it's interpening. And it's what currently doesn't exist in our industry. And so we give vocabulary and skill set to people who are trying to help people, serve people.
And I like that you also give it to people, the everyman. You'll let anybody pay for your class and come study it.
Oh, well, of course.
If they're customers or if they're professionals, and I think that part's fun because I mentioned in the intro, I was up in Mendocino and Humboldt this last week, and part of that was a trip through the Russian River. Had to see some of my favorite Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays, and talking to these folks in tasting rooms, talking to the fans who just go to the Russian River to taste a couple times a year, head up 2 hours north of San Francisco, and they're passionate about it. And truth is there is a parallel between wine and cannabis here. People are passionate about it. They want to know more about it, and it's great that you're teaching them part of the process, so they can take that pamphlet at home. I know you gave me one. I pull it out from time to time, even though I don't use a lot of flour. But yeah,
right on. Cool. Thanks.
It's very cool. All of this is part of the Trichome Institute. I mentioned earlier, you're its president. I want to talk about TAG, Trichome Assurance Grading. It's another way to assess marijuana quality. But tell me about how TAG or something like it might be something that'll be useful in the years to come, not only for consumers, but also businesses. And also, how do you ensure that TAG becomes that one figure that people look for? Because inevitably there will be 50 of these programs out there for people to try and get certified as a quality product.
When you go to the grocery store and buy food, it's been quality checked. When you buy medicine, it's been quality checked. We're a multi-billion-dollar industry that has no way to measure and quantify what our units should cost, except for, of course, the supply and demand, the market itself. But, dude, so many times you'll see a pound that is super high quality being sold for the same price as something no one should smoke. And it's because there's no measure of like, why is this one okay and this one isn't? And then once you can quantify and measure how much this pound is worth, I mean, now we have a system that says these units of wholesale product should cost this across the board for everyone. There's a system there to measure it. Cannabis cups make or break multi-million-dollar businesses.
Sure.
The people who are these cannabis cup judges, there's no qualification standards for judging. There's no method for how people judge. These judges judge things differently from each other.
Sure.
They're judging things that make them intoxicated, and they're judging intoxicated. There's, I could go on and on and on. The Trichome Institute, because we are experts in the field of what cannabis is and how to dissect its quality, what we did is we built a calculator, and we have an application that grades the quality of weed. And what it's grading on is only things that are scientifically measurable. And those things are measured with mathematics. And so we actually build these in-depth report cards on each sample that we test with microscopic photography, pictures of the bud structure, and then we use a technical system called inter-rater reliability, which means my perspective of these things I'm observing and I'm trying to measure on a scientific plane is subjective until another double-blind person uses the same standard operating procedure and comes up with the same answer. That's what we do. We are grading cannabis with two double-blind people who are coming up with the same numeric value. And so check this out. Sophisticated wine shoppers don't go into a liquor store and say, "Excuse me, sir, I'm looking for this species of grape at this percentage of alcohol. Could you please help me with that?" No, a sophisticated wine
You've
shopper.
clearly never been wine shopping with producer Vince then, because that's how he
Vince, we're
does it
going
pretty
wine
much.
shopping, buddy.
If it involved Mad Dog 2020
I'll see you in
has a
interpreting
great
class.
grape structure.
No, a sophisticated wine shopper says, "Hey, could you point me out to the 82 section?" Or, "I just had a great work week. I deserve a 95 today." Show me the 95s. Well, what is that? That is a level 3 sommelier who did a quality test on that vintage and gave it a numeric value of what its quality is, and it's respected. And
it's the industry standard.
it's the industry standard, and there's a price point to it that matches. We just made that for cannabis. We have that numeric value. And the other thing is, we're putting that into app technology. So you could have these apps that tell you where every single dispensary in the state exists. But if you want to know where the good ones are, which ones have a responsible vendor certification, cannabis product and sales training certification, have level 1 or level 2 interpreters working for their staff. How good is their weed? Based on what? On a fundamental system that is proven to be true that works. And so if you're a weed snob like me, only let me know when 92 or higher is in my area. You'll get a push notification in your cell phone when pounds that have been measured at that number are available there and then.
And you're doing this on a harvest batch level.
Yeah, and so we have a tag score. I think I have a tag shield somewhere over there, but a tag score is only good for 90 days.
Oh, okay.
And we have a lot of substantial research that shows, terpene degradation really starts to increase in matter at around day 90 to a point where the cannabis isn't of quality anymore, or the quality it used to be.
Sure.
Terpenes have a very short life cycle, shelf life.
Well, this is interesting, and the more and more you lay out a reason for these things existing,
Yeah.
I get it.
Cool.
I mean, that makes absolute sense, and I think, comparing intoxicant to intoxicant and the shopping experience makes sense. In fact, less than a month ago, we had some growers in here, and they had sent me a press release to try and get my attention, try and get me to write about them, saying they had like luxurious high-end cannabis. And I wanted to have them on the show, if only to ask them what the heck that means. Luxurious high-end cannabis, really, entertaining, informing interview. Good guys. I believe they really care. You know, most growers really do care. But then afterward, we were talking, and I mentioned how much I know what the wholesale rates are right now per pound, and sure enough, they are bringing in a lot more per pound. And sure enough, some friends try their stuff and their flower and really, really did enjoy it, more so than whatever else might be in the stash. So there is a quality difference here. There is no way of being able to say that there's a quality difference without, you know, oh yeah, we're a luxury high-end cannabis brand, or we scored a 95 through X.
So what Tag can do is Tag can help a grower like that prove it, which is critical. The reason why it's critical is because in the cannabis industry, first of all, everyone's an expert. And second of all, everyone grows the best weed.
I've learned that in the last 3 years.
So when you have an entire system of experts who all grow the best weed ever, but only a few of them actually grow quality, we have a system to support those people, to prove it. So yeah, if you're interested in Tag, definitely hit up the Trichome Institute.
Max, we're going to talk some more, but until then, thank you for joining us.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Ricardo. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, man.
I want to throw to our very own proprietor of pot. Of course, that's Professor Pat. It's a lot of P's, people. Come on. For this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Crystals, the common layman's term for the cannabis plant's trichomes. These tiny structures contain the vast majority of the plant's cannabinoids and are what is removed to create concentrates such as hash, hash oil, and keef. For example, that bud is covered in crystals, trichomes.
Thank you for that, Professor Pat. Always enlightening and educational. Lots of education on today's show, and I hope you're ready for more.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, Vince says. It's very true. And our next guest is also making his first appearance on the show. While he owns a marijuana business, he's also the spokesperson for a Colorado campaign that is making national headlines. So please help me in welcoming dispensary owner and No-on-200 spokesperson, Jim Parco, to the Cannabist Show. Hey.
Hey, Ricardo.
How's it going?
Good meeting you. Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure meeting you.
How are you, Max?
Hey, good seeing you.
Nice job.
Thanks.
And did I get the pronunciation of your last name right?
You did.
Parco?
You did. It is.
Okay. God, I've been forgetting a lot lately to ask people that. Jim, I know we just had a very intense discussion on Indica or Sativa, but in this old world, nomenclature of Indica and Sativa and what that typically means in our day-to-day life, where are you at in the spectrum?
Plug your ears. Indica. Indica.
Indica all the way.
Yeah, I think it would be Cannabis afghanica.
Cannabaceae.
Cannabaceae afghanica. I'm still learning. Yeah.
We all are, right? But I'm curious why you prefer Indica to the upper.
Running a campaign is pretty stressful, and sometimes you just want to relax. Sativas are not going to do that.
I hear that, and I want to talk a lot about the campaign, but first let's talk about you, because you have a really I love your resume right now. It's really interesting. You own a cannabis shop in Colorado. You are a college professor, and you're a political activist. So give me the quick lowdown on each of these endeavors and whatever else I'm missing in here.
Grandparents immigrated here about 100 years ago. My family lives on the same land that they have for 100 years. I was a poor kid, and poor kids, when you want to go to college and you can't afford it, you go to the military. So I spent 24 years in the Air Force, retired.
24 years?
Long time.
Wow,
yeah.
Amazing.
It was a long time. And my wife and I, she was a 5th grade elementary school teacher, and I had become a professor, got hired, and we decided a few years ago that we may actually, on our family farm, buy the piece of land right next door and open up a marijuana business. We're probably two of the least likely people to enter into this, and that became very apparent in the community. We weren't the marijuana kids. I was a valedictorian. My wife was Miss Pueblo County. We've been dating since we were 15 years old, went to college, did the military thing. But we realized that, and I'm embarrassed to even admit this, as a professor, you always tell the truth as you see it. And everything's driven by data and knowledge. And I really never cared about cannabis because I knew it was bad for you. It was the gateway drug.
Sure.
Until I took a sabbatical. And as a business professor at the college, the kids are really interested in this new industry in Colorado, and I knew nothing about it. So I had to educate myself. So anytime you start a new research area, you're reading the literature and looking for the pros and the cons. And I was flabbergasted, Ricardo. I couldn't find the legitimate negative research that I had believed my whole life.
Sure.
So as we're thinking about this possibly, my wife and I hadn't really started thinking about buying the land yet. I thought, I've got to know the industry from the inside. So I went on sabbatical, and I walked to a store in Colorado Springs, knocked on his door, and said, look, I'm thinking about opening a marijuana store. It's going to be across the street from you, or I might do it in Pueblo. And if you hire me to work here and learn the business, I'll do it in Pueblo. He said, hired. So I trimmed, I mopped, I washed buckets. I just worked as a low-level entry employee for 4 months to learn the industry. And every stereotype that I had imagined was just obliterated. I saw the efficacy of what this did for people who walked in the store every day. I saw how it was grown, that this really is agriculture, and we have ignored this plant because it had been demonized for so many years of history, which your listeners obviously know. And I've kind of gone to the other side. So I went from somebody who didn't care to being one of its largest proponents.
It's fun to hear that story. This is definitely my first time hearing that story, especially because it is my story.
Wow.
I wasn't, I wasn't consuming marijuana for most of my life. I just don't smoke anything successfully. My lungs are having none of it. And so weed was always very available, but I don't smoke. So, okay, I guess I'm just not into weed. Then I discovered edibles. And then I was like, oh, I'm definitely into weed. But then I demanded to understand it better, did the research, and again found what you have found.
And what we're learning every day in our store. So it's my wife and I, we're owners, operators. We're the quintessential mom and pop shop. We're the furthest southeast in the state of Colorado, so lower Arkansas Valley. But our average customer is 50 years old. And he or she has never even seen a cannabis plant or tried it. But I looked at your little quiz on the millennials, they support us, but you look at the growing market, it really is older Americans that have fallen subject to the same kind of narrative that we did to believe how bad it was. And they're coming to get their own data. And I'm telling you, it's just amazing to watch minds change. It just takes 10 minutes for people with an open mind to have a conversation. And they realize they were probably wrong in their assumptions.
I think that's happening. We're seeing it as well. So some of the specifics, though, the shop you own, Mesa Organics, the college you teach at, Colorado College, very esteemed private university in Colorado Springs. What do you teach there?
Business and economics. Right now I'm teaching an entrepreneurship class.
Okay, cool. Well, fascinating. Thanks for sharing that about yourself. But let's move on to Measure 200. Measure 200 in Pueblo would halt recreational marijuana sales and operations in one of Colorado's most 420-friendly counties. Pueblo County residents are voting on it next month, November 8th. Jim, you're the spokesperson for the No-on-200 campaign, as your button would attest, your button on your badge. So tell me why Pueblo voters should vote to keep these retail pot businesses.
I like to remind people that everybody's entitled to their own opinions. They're not entitled to their own facts. And when you really look at what the facts have done, when we legalized 64 in 2012, we all have to admit, we really didn't know how this was going to work out.
No idea.
Everybody's got their narratives on both sides, but now we have data. And when you start looking at the data, this is what's incontrovertible. We have created 1,300 new jobs with the industry. Now, our opposition likes...
And that's Pueblo County?
In Pueblo County,
sure.
These are 1,300 jobs that are directly relatable, counted, state-licensed, badged employees. And I'm going to go on the record to say most of these people did not have jobs. When the steel mill was in Pueblo, it closed 30 years ago. I was born and raised, and I watched this, and I watched my community just stagnate. And we've been stagnant for decades. We are on the heels of an economic boom now. We are bringing in $3.5 million of tax revenue into our community right now. We have these 1,300 people that are employed. When you've got those kinds of numbers, that really creates an economic vitality in a society. We have given $900,000 to the local university, CSU Pueblo, for a Cannabis Research Institute. We've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to FFA and 4-H programs. When you look at building permits, 62% of building permits in the commercial sector directly tied to the cannabis industry.
62%.
Commercial, 50% of all building permits. When you look at the numbers, It's incredible. And when I heard that you had this group of people, I call them the CAVE people. CAVE is an acronym for Citizens Against Virtually Everything. It's this minority group that comes up, and anytime we've had an opportunity in Pueblo, Walmart wanted to build a distribution center. No, called the CAVE people, and it went away. And then we had Budweiser wanting to build a bottling plant. No, cried the CAVE people. Now they're crying, no, cannabis industry. And you scratch your head, you think, what are you opposed to? And they said, we're going to try to basically turn back the clock and return us to prohibition. And when you look at the ballot measure, it basically is getting rid of all the economic benefits, destroying 1,300 jobs, but it does nothing with respect to marijuana. That's a state constitutional right to grow, to possess, to consume. So basically, the only thing Proposition 200 does in Pueblo is to destroy all the economic benefits, and any negatives that cannabis has brought to our society that they're claiming will be unchanged. It doesn't make any sense, and yet we're going forward. We're very confident that this is going to turn out well for us, but just because it's a low probability that this might pass, we got to be careful. I think all of us thought that Donald Trump becoming a viable candidate for president or Britain leaving the EU were low probability events. Stranger things have happened, so we're fighting hard until the very last minute because, quite frankly, Pueblo is the first domino. We were the first to legalize along with Denver. We have been kind of on the leading edge in terms of our regulatory development, and I think the prohibitionists realize this is an opportunity because although it took 15% of the electorate to have petition signers get on the ballot, Pueblo said, you know what, we're going to let you do it with 5. That was out of bounds, but it didn't matter. It got on the ballot, and now that it's there, people are going to get to vote on it. Prohibitionists realize that if they can turn back legalization in Pueblo, this may become a viable prohibitionist strategy to use elsewhere. So not only do we need to defeat it soundly, we need to submit a message to the entire prohibitionist movement: stay out of our counties, go away. Once we've legalized it, the do-over votes, they're just not going to work.
And just a couple things. I know avid listeners of the show, avid readers of the site will know this. We've invited the Yes on 200 camp here. They weren't willing to drive up to Denver for the interview. We will be in touch with them. We will be reporting on this story before the election. But a couple things about Pueblo, because it is a unique place in Colorado, because you mentioned the steel mill. My family's from there as well.
There you go.
Very economically depressed city and county. Has been for decades.
And we're on that upswing now.
Through much of my childhood, it has been. It's also been one of those areas in the state where government officials have really embraced cannabis. We've had Sal Pace, one of the county commissioners, on the show before, and talked to him for a lot of our stories. And he's the first to come out and extol the virtues of these monies that you're talking about. A lot of the tax monies going toward research at CSU Pueblo, going toward college scholarships for Pueblo-educated children who are going to university in Pueblo. Sal told us on this program that Pueblo parks, streets have never been in better shape than they are now compared to recent decades. So this is making a very big impact down there. I think it's just important for readers to kind of understand that unique situation down there where you have a previously economically depressed area and a government now embracing a somewhat controversial industry, and this is kind of where you end up.
Well, I think you're bringing up an excellent point because Commissioner Pace and his colleagues, Commissioner McFadden, Commissioner Hart, these politicians did something very risky that you don't see oftentimes from politicians. They went forward. They looked at the voting pattern for 64. It passed 55% in Pueblo County. And they said, we're going to go forth with this legalization. That's politically risky, but what they have done in our community has been fantastic. You take the political favorable climate along with our availability of water, sunlight, inexpensive land. It really has been the perfect storm for success of the cannabis industry.
And sunlight's a good point. We've talked about it on the show. Pueblo County, I believe, is the only county in Colorado that allows the outdoor commercial cultivation of this plant. Even Max and I, as Colorado citizens, we can't grow outdoor legally, not in our backyard. My plant is in a pot in my living room right now, and she's kind of sad about it. But
and you should see, 5 miles from where we are is the largest legal outdoor cultivation in the world, Los Sueños Farms. 36 acres, 21,800 plants, and you can see them when you're driving by the highway.
Oh, really?
This is the new reality.
Sure.
This is farming.
And it's more sustainable than what we have in the rest
Absolutely.
of the state. Supporters of 200, the Yes on 200 camp, they say that retail cannabis has brought crime, transience, and an undesirable reputation to Pueblo. Big Boston Globe story, they came out and reported on it since Massachusetts is voting on this in November. What's your response to that?
You also left off Hurricane Matthew. Right? So what they have done, and this is their political strategy, is anything negative we can see in our community, how do we tie it to marijuana? And I keep going back to saying, hold on a second. You were talking about the regulated retail industry of state licensed employees and state licensed businesses. So when they talk about transients, well, when you look at the director of Posada, she wrote an op-ed in the paper on September 1st, and she talked about the issues we've had with increased homelessness. Nothing about the regulated industry. When you talk about crime, all the crime statistics they're using are from July of 2015. If you look at the police chief, when he reported on 15 August in our local paper, he said this has been a very quiet year. Crime is actually down. So they're cherry picking their facts. So we've actually, I wrote an open letter to Pueblo County at the end of August, and I said, look, put it on second page of the newspaper. It's time for us to get together in the truest spirit of the American ideal in civil discourse, that we actually have a public dialogue, your side and our side. We had this plan for a month. And then 2 days before it was going to happen at the college, they backed out. So we had a panel discussion. We've also had a debate scheduled to be hosted by the League of Women Voters. This has been on the books for probably a month or two. That was scheduled for next Wednesday, and then 2 days ago, they backed out of that again. They are very nervous now that they actually realize that we have a narrative that's gaining traction and is fact-based. It's very hard to take these kinds of claims on homelessness. Well, sure, homelessness has increased because our population has increased. Oh, and Pueblo and or Springs and Denver are trying to reduce their homeless population by giving homeless bus tickets 100 miles away. Where are you going to go? Pueblo, they are. So there are things that are happening, and we don't dispute that. We dispute the fact that crime is up because the police chief's telling us crime is down. The sheriff has been great in Pueblo County about busting these illegal grows. I think in April, May, June, that time period, they busted almost 30 illegal operations.
Sure.
And we're the first ones.
In houses.
Oh, it's
Typically
terrible.
in
Yeah.
houses.
I mean, we're the first ones to say, thank God he is doing this because this is what it takes. Regulate, tax, and enforce the laws. And when you do this, you get rid of the black market. So we're enforcing that, but the black market grows are illegal activity. In our industry, it's about compliance. We tell our employees we are not in the cannabis industry. We're in the compliance industry. And if we do our jobs well, we sell cannabis. But that is Colorado's secret, and specifically Pueblo County, of why we have been the first and we're so successful, because we understand what it takes to make this a legitimate business.
Sure. Well, let's bring Max into the conversation again as we continue to talk about this Measure 200 in Southern Colorado. Max, you're a state certified educator. Jim, you're an activist and a businessman working to keep these pot sales legal in Pueblo. Local control, two big words, very meaningful. A lot of the people who have come to look at Colorado's pot model to see if maybe they want to cherry pick bits and pieces of it for their own states, for their own countries. Local control is a big one. Local municipalities can say, hey, we want this, or hey, we don't. And I know the Boston Globe story mentioned that this situation in Pueblo is unprecedented. It's actually not, because back in 2014, Manitou Springs, another Colorado city, smaller than Pueblo significantly, a small contingent there uprose and said, we don't want recreational marijuana in our backyard. NIMBYism, they got enough signatures, got on the ballot, they voted during the midterm election. And the citizens there decided, no, we do want recreational marijuana. It was a majority. They still have retail pot. Now this is happening in Pueblo. But I'm going to ask both of you. We'll start with Max. What would this mean if 200 passes in Pueblo and retail pot has to go completely away? What does this mean for businesses, for people working in the sector? Also, what does it mean for Colorado's cannabis industry, since places like Los Sueños are providing a lot of wholesale cannabis throughout the entire state? Max?
It means something really simple in my eyes, which is reefer madness is back. And, our whole country was lied to about what cannabis is and how it works. It's still federally illegal because it provides no medical benefit except We have pharmaceutical grade cannabis distributed to patients in hospitals, and our government owns the patent for the medical aspect of cannabis.
True.
So people have been lied to, and they're confused on what this is. And out of confusion comes irrational fear. And the reason why these people aren't coming to your live debates, the reason why they're not coming to the Cannabis Show is because they're afraid they're really, really wrong. And so, it's just going back to, Reefer Madness days, which didn't support anyone. I mean, what I don't want to do is repeat all of the fantastic things you said, but it's like, it's a no-brainer. We have a better economy. We have prescription pharmaceutical overdoses are down. Crime is down. The only thing that's up is the economy and people's happiness and jobs and well-being. And so I think it means it'd be really sad to see a county know how positive this is and then go backwards from that.
And
based off of irrational fear, which is what Reefer Madness is. This is what, I'm an activist too, and it's like, we've been fighting, 80 years for this since hemp. We don't need to go back in time. We have Pueblo as an opportunity to be the model for what cannabis growing should be in everywhere else in the country. I think it's ridiculous that we're forced to grow cannabis indoors and our carbon footprint is megalithic and doesn't need to be. And I think Pueblo can be a really great model for, you can grow cannabis like a farm commodity, it's agriculture, and you can hire PTSD vets or whoever to come, keep it safe, and it's okay, it works, people aren't getting hurt. So yeah, I think it would be really, really sad to go back in time, and I don't think it makes sense.
And that's a good point, because as Jim noted earlier, Pueblo was 55% in November of 2012 when we voted on Amendment 64. So the county did vote then for recreational sales statewide. How are they going to vote this time? But Jim, you own a business down there. You live there. You have history there. What does this mean for businesses like yours, for employees like yours, if it passes in this hypothetical?
You're forcing me to think about something that I don't even want to imagine, because I watched the pain of our community when the steel mill left. It was devastating. I was having this conversation. Something you said, Max, I think you hit it on the head. They're scared.
Yeah.
They're scared. And I think he's right, because they're afraid of the truth. But they're afraid of a truth that we are about to expose on them. And I actually filed a lawsuit against the opposition, the other registered issue committee, a couple of weeks ago, because we see all the information that's being sent out by direct mail and door hangers, they're unlawful. They're violating the law. And I just had to assume it was them putting it out. And they came back and said, we didn't produce it. Well, who paid for it? And they said, we didn't pay for it. So then we see, well, now we know these are all smoking guns, but since they've admitted publicly, and I take people at their word, I went ahead and dropped that lawsuit, and I filed 2 additional lawsuits against the people that have their names on that literature. What we found out is one of them has a registered agent here in Denver. It's called Safer Pueblo. It's a nonprofit, and they are the ones that seem to be behind all of this special interest money coming into Pueblo. We've become convinced this is no longer a local issue. It should be. It should be the citizens of a community determining the fate of that community. But what we're seeing on the other side, we see quite a bit of money being funneled in through these illegal nonprofits producing all of these unlawful activities. And I've asked them about it, and they're very quiet. And this is why they've pulled out of the debates. They don't want to talk. They fear for the safety of their secret. And I get that. And the downside is, by the time this whole legal process adjudicates, it'll be after the election. But we're about truth and transparency. And if they don't want to talk to us in the media, they can tell it to a judge under oath in a court of law. But at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to reckon for the position that they have. This is the end of the prohibitionist movement. We are in the final throes, but I can't agree more that this needs to be local. Every community has a right to determine the future of cannabis in a community. If you want to look at Pueblo, it's 1,300 jobs. This is what keeps me awake at night, because I hired people that were unemployed, and I was talking to one of our associates. And right before I filed these lawsuits, the question was, this is always negative when you fight like this. And I looked at her, I said, so maybe we don't do it. And she said, please save my job.
Sure.
And that's all the motivation that we need. We are going to fight tirelessly for the men and women in our community because they deserve it.
You know, I want to hear more about, you know, and we'll talk after the after the taping. I know I've been in touch with your campaign's publicist, and that stuff is interesting. I know some listeners might hear something like that and think that it's a crazy conspiracy theory. That there's out-of-state money coming into these very local elections about this still controversial issue. But I did some reporting maybe 10 months ago about many of the lawsuits that were against that have been very well publicized, including many sheriffs in Colorado and neighbor states suing the governor, suing the state over retail weed. You know, business owners and private residents, including one in Pueblo County, suing individual marijuana businesses, going from that perspective. And what I found in the reporting was that these individuals who were suing the state, suing the marijuana business, in almost every situation, they all did have a third party. It wasn't based in Colorado. Usually it was based in DC or somewhere on the East Coast. In Florida, they were taking in campaign money. They were taking in money to cover the expense of these lawsuits, suing Hickenlooper, legal pot in Colorado in general. This was happening then because they saw a potential crack in the edifice. You know, they saw, hey, if Colorado sheriffs don't like this, and these Colorado sheriffs have gone on the record in media saying, we don't like this. And so then this interest comes into Colorado, gathers the sheriffs up and says, we'll finance the entire thing. We just need you guys to be, you know, put your name on the lawsuit and help us win this thing. That I could see that happening here. I don't know, because I haven't seen what you've seen, but I'm very curious. And I just want to throw it out there that it's happened before, and special interest groups who have, you know, money, you know, they have money at stake. You know, whether it's drug testing or drug rehab centers or law enforcement or the corrections industry. We have seen all of those people not only contributing money to, you know, the campaigns against legal recreational, but also contributing money to lawsuits that are trying to take down this post-prohibition world that the three of us have found ourselves in, right? So I look forward to talking to you more after this taping about that, because that's interesting. I want to see what you've seen. But gentlemen, it's time for the pot quiz.
All right.
Let's jump in. Two very intelligent men on the couch. And Max, we're going to start with you. How about that?
Cool.
If you get the answer, great. You get the point. If you get it wrong, you have an opportunity to steal. Vice versa. We'll move right along. Max Montrose, here you go. The Attorney General for what U.S. state is now saying Colorado marijuana is, quote, permeating every part of his state? What U.S. state?
I'm going to have to say Nebraska.
Good guess, Nebraska.
Well, because that was a thing, was it? Well, Nebraska did
You had 50-50 shot on this one.
have
Yeah, this was a very recent statement. Yeah, that was the
Very
thrust
recent?
of the Supreme Court lawsuit. Yeah, that lots of Colorado marijuana was filtering across our many borders.
So this is more of a current event.
All of these are current. Yes, very current.
Gotcha, okay.
As in the news in the last week. So
Yeah.
it's not Nebraska. Do you have an idea?
Well, I'm going to have to guess too, because all I'm doing right now is this campaign, so I'm not reading as broadly as I normally do. I would have guessed Nebraska first.
Yeah.
Oklahoma or Texas would have been second. I'm going to go with Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Just a wild guess.
Good guess too. You know, a brand new medical climate, no sales yet, but no. It is somebody who shares a border with us, and it is Kansas.
Whoa.
Yeah, and Kansas, technically not a part of the Supreme Court lawsuit, but some of their sheriffs and I believe like county administrators or a certain position were named in that sheriff's lawsuit. So that was Kansas. No points yet. Moving over to Jim.
Are
Your
you smarter
question.
than a fifth grader?
They're all cave people in Kansas.
That's right.
Jim, name the musician who is helping to convert a California prison into a cannabis farm.
Damian Marley.
Wow, no hesitation.
I read that story.
All right, I'm glad you did. Yeah, interesting story. He just put his name on a dispensary right here by Mile High Stadium and then hopped over to California in Coalinga. Producer Vince probably remembers we talked about that story a couple months ago, and now Damian Marley's attached to it. So, here we go for you, Max. Next question. What country's police force has destroyed 2.4 million marijuana plants since June of this year?
Which country?
Which country's police force, yeah.
I know some individuals who have probably personally
destroyed
destroyed
that
2.4 million
Well, so the
marijuana
thing
plants.
was, I believe I just saw a story the other day about there's a new government in this country that for the very first time just destroyed cocaine and marijuana, and I think it was something like 7 tons or something absurd like that. So, God, I don't want to say Uruguay because they legalized cannabis there, and I don't think they would burn these marijuana plants. I just got to think of like a country that's like Texas. It's China. Shoot, man.
Who is the Texas of the world?
Who's the Texas of the world? God, I'm not sure.
Throw out a guess.
I'm gonna say, you know what? Peru.
Peru. Good guess. Not the
even
right
close.
one. Jim, 2.4 million marijuana plants since June destroyed.
I was going to say United States, but the way you worded the question, what country's police force, since we don't have really a national police force,
I think it's general police in that country, but yeah.
so it'd be the United States is what came to mind.
The trick question, huh? You think is that your final answer?
That or Mexico? Yeah, I'm going to go with U.S.
I bet we did at some point between the various county, city.
We still have
federal-
Kansas,
they
Nebraska,
burn that
and
much
Oklahoma.
weed from California grows every year anyways.
Yeah.
I'm
DEA
sure.
with their helicopters. And
Albania.
who would have known that, dude?
Oh
Is
man!
that even still a country?
Oddly, if you go
What kind of
to
a question is this?
if you go to just Google Albania on a search on the Cannabis, we run stories out of Albania like once every other month.
Yeah?
Yeah, those people are after it.
Oh, yeah?
It is like public enemy number one.
And the question is why? But like this whole special interest money thing, it's the same thing that started this whole mess in Reefer Madness 80 years ago. It was special interests and how much cannabis threatens, but I guess that's another show later. But why? What's the problem?
Well, in many ways, America big-footed its own drug war and drug values on international organizations and other governments, right? And
We
now
made
they're
weed
stuck in a
illegal.
different era.
We made weed illegal for planet Earth.
And then we
I
made
don't
it
even know
legal.
how that's possible. How do you have a jurisdiction like that?
Right.
I don't know, but I still think the U.S. destroyed at least that much last year.
Yeah, I think it's probably twice that.
At least.
Okay,
Half a point.
final question
Thanks,
to
Vince.
Jim.
I did not prepare for this test.
Final question to Jim. According to that new Pew survey that me and Vince were talking about, an overwhelming majority of Democrats support legalization.
Okay.
But what about Republicans? A, they too support it now. B, they still oppose legalization. C, split down the middle.
So I'm going to answer this based on data I see coming in every day from the store.
Okay.
I would say of the people that walk in the store, it's probably split pretty close 50-50 down party lines. My guess would be roughly 70% of Democrats probably support legalization. I'm going to say 55% of Republicans. So based on that data, I'm going to say more than 50%.
Support it.
Support it.
So that would be A, and that would be incorrect.
Then I know what the answer is.
Max, A, they support it. You know that's not true now. B, they oppose legalization. C, it's split right down the middle.
I think it would make sense that it's split down the middle because, 5 to 10 years ago, it would have been 100% Republicans, conservatives, this is drugs and all of that. But maybe now you could just tap the Republicans on the shoulder and be like, hey, the border issue? How would you like to keep all the money? And by the way, it doesn't hurt people like you've been taught. And they're like, really? maybe cannabis legalization is an okay thing.
Part of me hopes these are the best explained pair of wrong answers.
Thanks, dude.
And I think
I'm going with 50-50. I'm going with 50-50.
50-50.
Because the world is changing. I mean, people.
Sure.
I mean, it's changing. I would be surprised and disappointed if Republicans didn't see that this is less government. That this is, telling you what you can and cannot do, and that
Well, and I'm gonna
there's an
say-
economic factor that's surging through the roof. And
This question too, I'm always skeptical of the questions.
Sure.
This is what people are saying when you ask them.
Very
I'm
true.
answering the question of how do they behave when nobody's watching.
Oh, yeah.
I like
So
that. Yeah.
maybe the answer is spread
inherent
down the middle
bias.
what they're saying, but I can tell you, for what we see every day, more Republicans
true.
support this
true.
than don't, irrespective of what they're telling you. It's
true.
I'll take that
True,
one to the
but where are
bank.
you coming into contact with these Republicans? In a Colorado pot shop?
So you're meaning more
You know,
420
that,
friendly
yes,
Republicans.
but again, I'm a professor. I
Sure.
talk to parents. I talk to a lot of people that understand who I am and what industry I'm in, and a lot of them are like, "I support you." It's like, why are we whispering, right?
know, right.
But again, the stigma's still there. This is the arc of progress. We're moving forward, but irrespective of what the answer is here, the good news is everybody's moving in our direction.
You know, like when cannabis became a thing and I became known for being involved with that thing, I mean, a lot of the older dudes at synagogue would be like, I'm on your side. Or, it's the same thing. It's like everybody who's been, like, there's a lot of closet, people still in the closet
That's
about
a good
it.
point. Although I will point out Pew is the height of public information. They've been asking this question for decades. So, yeah, that does change. It changes when you legalize marijuana in even California. Suddenly people are more comfortable talking about it, even if it's just over a faceless telephone poll conducted by a legitimate agency. Definitely there's that bias. But no correct answer here. It
This
is still
is like the
they
great
still
day. Good
oppose
day.
legalization. The Republicans,
Well,
when
they're
they're
also-
asked.
when they're asked,
When they're asked.
according to Pew.
According to Pew, yes.
And
That was so much fun to watch.
Listen, if Trump is the runner, then maybe you're right. Maybe 100% of them think making tons of money, building roads, hospitals, and schools, and not hurting people at the same time is a bad idea.
You missed the wall.
Yeah.
I
wall.
think that if you're looking at the data, it's gaining momentum, as
It is.
both of you guys pointed out. Now, if it's 54% oppose, it used to be 60, and it probably used to be 70, and it did break it down between hyper-conservatives, the more liberal conservatives, and everybody but the hyper-conservatives on the R spectrum does support legalization.
The real shift, though, it's a demographic. The younger folks,
Oh, yeah.
they support, the older folks don't. Younger folks are typically progressive, older typically conservative. We use these, factors of Republican versus Democrat, but fundamentally, it's just it's generational.
Just like we were talking about earlier, 56, 57% support in the boomers and X, 70s, 71, 72% support among producer Vince's favorite millennials.
Millennials.
So there is change afoot. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
you,
Fantastic time. I want to thank my guests, Max Montrose and Jim Parco, but most importantly, thanks to you all for watching, for listening, for reading, for helping us achieve those traffic numbers last month. We hope to beat them this current month, and we hope to do good work that you guys respect and appreciate. So next week's episode is going to be a little bit different than any of the others we've ever done. So please make sure you're following the Cannabist, producer Vince and myself on Twitter for updates. And to make sure you don't miss anything, I'm Ricardo Baca, joined by producers Vince, Don, the rest of the crew. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week.
I'm allowed to lose.
Nice.
That
was fun.
That was a really good time.
Posse, you'll be raising at the end. I say it again. Ain't afraid to get in. I be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand. I'm raw.